And welcome to the January 21st, 2025 Eugene City Council public hearing. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid format meeting. Anyone wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by following the instructions listed for this meeting on the public webcasts and meeting materials webpage of the City of Eugene website. There are 3 public hearings on tonight's agenda. Please note that members of the public who sign up to testify may speak only to the topic that is the subject of the stated hearing. For those wishing to testify during the public hearing, please fill out a request to speak form available on the city's public webcast and meeting materials webpage. These request to speak forms are also used to generate the order of the speakers and correctly enter speakers' names into the public record. We will accept requests to speak forms until 5:35, so for another 3 minutes or so. For those wishing to provide testimony by phone or unable to complete the request to speak form online, press *9, and the last 3 digits of your phone number will be added to the speaker's queue. As a reminder, the council's meeting rules of conduct include no flags, signs, loud or disruptive language, noise, or conduct that obstructs the business of the council. Please keep the room quiet and respectful for all speakers so everyone can be heard. You are more than welcome to wave your hands in silent support. Additionally, we encourage all those that are ill or who have had close contact with other people who are ill to join our meeting remotely rather than in person. We also encourage attendees to spread out within the meeting space and wear a mask. If you're comfortable doing so, we have some available at the back of the room if you need one. In case of medical emergency, an automated external defibrillator, AED, is located on the counter behind the staff to the left on the side of the room underneath the large screen. And in case of an emergency evacuation, emergency exits are through the double doors located in the back of the room, and also these double doors heading out to the patio can be used as needed. And with that, I will call this meeting to order. 5:33. We have a couple of minutes until our 5:35 time check.
Yes, that's right. So what you could do is you could invite the Assistant City Manager to speak to the topic while we're waiting.
Perfect. Let's begin. The first public hearing on tonight's agenda is a public hearing on the annual withdrawal of annexed properties from special districts. Assistant City Manager, would you please introduce the topic?
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear any comments on the proposed withdrawal of annexed properties from special service districts. These withdrawals come before the council on an annual basis. The 2025 batch contains 10 annexations that were approved by City Council throughout 2024. Tonight is a public hearing only. Potential action is scheduled for February 10th.
Thank you. I'm going to hold us for about another 40 seconds. Stories from a wonderful weekend and MLK March yesterday. Lots of folks who were there. It is now 5:35, and I will now open the public hearing. Staff, can you please share the list of speakers on screen or announce any speakers who we have?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm still waiting for the form to close, but at this time there are no speakers for this first hearing. Let's just give it one more moment. Mayor, there are no speakers for the first hearing this evening.
Thank you. Then with that, I will close this public hearing. Are there any questions or comments from council, either present in the room or online? With no questions from council, we will move on to our second public meeting on tonight's agenda. The second public hearing, I should say, on tonight's agenda, which is the Shepherd Motors Plan Amendments and Zone Changes. Assistant City Manager, would you please introduce this topic?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Tonight, the Eugene City Council.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We do need you to close the first public hearing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought that I did. I will close the first public meeting officially before we begin, the first public hearing before we begin our second public hearing. And now, Assistant City Manager, take it away.
Right. Tonight, the Eugene City Council is holding a public hearing to consider a Metro Plan amendment, refinement plan amendment, and zone change that would change the land use designation on the property to light medium industrial and change the zoning to E2 mixed use employment. These changes are requested for an undeveloped 5-acre property located on the west side of Old Coburg Road, which is across the street from the new Shepherd Motors auto dealership. The applicant has requested these changes to facilitate the development of the lot as discussed in the AIS. Tonight is a public hearing only. Deliberations and potential action are scheduled for February 10th.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager. The City Council's role in this process is to approve with modifications, or deny the application. The decision-making process for this application is considered quasi-judicial, so we will use a quasi-judicial format for this public hearing. And so to start, do any councilors need to disclose any bias, conflicts of interest, ex parte communications, or abstentions pursuant to EC 9.7065?
We do have one counselor online.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to disclose that the owners of Shepherd Motors are friends of mine. I do not have any ex parte communication on this particular question or any biases that would keep me from rendering a fair decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Clark. Any other comments from council? Thank you. No ex parte contacts were announced. Had they been, and before we proceed, I want to state that anyone testifying would have had the right to address and rebut the substance of any ex parte communication that had been disclosed. Have staff received any challenges to the councilor's impartiality submitted pursuant to Eugene Code? Thank you. Testimony presented at this public hearing should be directed towards the applicable approval criteria and other criteria that the speaker believes apply to the decision. The applicable approval criteria for this Metro Plan amendment, refinement plan amendment, and zone change are located in Eugene Code sections 9.7735, 9.8424, and 9.8865. The full text of those code sections is available in the findings attached to the AIS for this public hearing. The failure of anyone to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the City Council and parties an opportunity to respond will preclude appeals on that issue. For quasi-judicial proceedings, once the public hearing is opened, speakers will be called in the following order. First, those in support, including the applicant. Second, those with a neutral position. And third, those opposed. If you would like to receive future notice of this application and become an interested party, please provide your name and mailing address with your testimony and reach out to staff with this information. And I'll now open the public hearing. I believe we're joined by the applicant's representative, Michael M. Reeder of the Law Office of Mike Reeder. Sir, would you like to make a statement?
Good evening, Mayor Knudsen, City Council, City staff. My name is Mike Reeder. I'm an attorney with the law firm Law Office of Mike Reeder, 375 West 4th Avenue, Suite 205 in Eugene. I represent Shepherd Motors. Today with me is Phil Spears, the owner of Shepherd Motors, and he is here available to answer any questions that the mayor or the City Council may have. I'm going to keep my comments brief. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this plan amendment zone change. And during the Planning Commission meeting, planning staff did a great job of presenting the criteria and the application. Tonight, we wish to support the planning staff's AIS that recommends approval. The opportunity for this plan amendment zone change is important for the city as well as for the applicant. It allows the opportunity, if so desired, and if market forces permit, to expand the Shepherd Motors operation, or to allow any other use that are allowed in the E2 zone. The E1 zone is kind of it's not a great zone for this particular location. We reached out to the neighborhood group, the Northeast Neighbors, of course, had the mandatory neighborhood meeting. Phil Spears has done a great job in the past and with this application of reaching out to the neighbors, providing a rationale for why this request has come to the city. At the Planning Commission meeting, we did have support from the Northeast Neighbors representative. I believe there was no opposition to the application. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer those tonight. And if not, that will conclude my presentation for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Cherish, do we have any other interested parties who are asking to speak?
Mayor, we have one more speaker for this topic, and that is Chris Clemau. Give me just a moment. I believe he may be online. Chris, I'm going to allow you to speak. You now have permission to speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Chris Clemau. Honestly, I do not need to speak. I am the transportation engineer on behalf of the applicant, and I just wanted to let you know I'm available to answer any technically related kind of transportation questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Chris. It does not appear that there are any questions. Mayor, that was our final speaker for this second hearing.
Thank you. Any staff response? Thank you. With that, I will close our second public hearing, close that public hearing. And move on to our third public hearing for the evening. Before I do that, a reminder that deliberations and possible action for that second public hearing are scheduled to February 10th, 2025. The final public hearing on tonight's agenda is a public hearing.
Mayor,
Yes. Did I miss something?
you also need to close the record for these applications.
Oh, thank you very much. I did not close the application record. Would any counselors like to speak before we move on to that item? Yes, Counselor Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the materials for this, it looks like the E2 zone allows a lot more manufacturing type uses than the E1 zone. And it does look like this is a property that is adjacent to residential properties. I know the applicant is not proposing a manufacturing use, but I know that there have been some ongoing concerns with manufacturing, particularly various types of manufacturing that may be polluting, ending up located next to residential. Was that part of the conversation with this application at all?
Good evening, everyone. Jeff Gepper, Senior Planner with the City of Eugene. Thank you for the question, Counselor. So that topic didn't come up during Planning Commission. I don't believe we haven't received testimony on that either. There are certain buffering standards that are required for these areas when they're adjacent to residential, which was actually also applied when Shepherd Motors developed the property that is across the street. So there are some buffering standards that exist, but know that to answer your question directly, that did not come up previously.
And again, and so like when we're talking about the types of manufacturing uses that are there, they're what we would think of as like a factory that's producing wood products or something like that. That would be allowed if Shepherd Motors decided not to develop it.
Yeah, absolutely. So not all types of manufacturing are allowed in E2. So there's the use list is actually provided, I believe, within the AIS. It kind of highlights what is the difference between E1 and E2. Some of the heavier levels of industrial development aren't allowed in the E2 zone.
Okay.
That might be more like your wood mills and those things. And there's other limitations that apply in E2, like the outdoor storage of materials is also much more limited than it would be in a normal industrial zone.
Okay, so the E2, even though it says on the thing it allows this type of manufacturing, it's more restricted than it
That-
might be in an industrial zone.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Councillor Groves?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify a little bit, I was involved with the, what started out as the Health Overlay Zone proposal. And actually, manufacturing is one of the step downs that serves as a buffer to residential parks and schools, so more sensitive occupancies. But it was never intended to, I mean, you've got to have something in between the houses and the commercial industrial applications. It's mostly to protect from the heavy industrial, so, you know, things like J.H. Baxter and some of the mills. But manufacturing, I presume we will be seeing in closer proximity to neighborhoods. But that's a completely different type use than where the health overlay zone discussions began. Thank you, Mayor.
That, I will again close our public hearing, but also, unless there are any objections from council, close the record for these applications. Thank you all. And as a reminder, deliberations and possible actions are scheduled for February 10th. The final public hearing on tonight's agenda is a public hearing ordinance amending EC 6.552 to conform with DEQ industrial pretreatment regulations. Assistant City Manager, would you please introduce this topic?
Mayor, this item is a small update to the ordinance amending Eugene Code 6.552 1B2A and is needed to correct an error and align the ordinance to an Oregon Department of Environmental Quality industrial pretreatment regulations and to align it with the ordinances of agency partners. The language changes the total allowed time pH measurements can be outside the required limits from 8 hours to 7 hours and 26 minutes.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager. I now open the public hearing. Staff, can you please share a list of speakers on screen or announce the first speaker if we have any?
Thank you, Mayor. There are no speakers for this final public hearing.
With that, unless any comments from council, I will close the public hearing. Are there any additional questions or comments? Thank you all. Then that concludes our agenda for today. I will close the January 21st, 2025 public hearing. We are adjourned.